When you look at the Book of Boba Fett, and that's what we're talking about, questions that the Book of Boba Fett, which is a new series that's going to come out next December, and we're not really sure. It's looking like it's a sequel to The Mandalorian, actually, or not, maybe not a sequel, but happening during that time period. There's some things that we have to look at as far as the series goes. And so that's what this whole topic is about. But I do want to catch this thing that Ronaldo says. John Campea recently said, referring to this, all the healing that Mandalorian did was undone in a single day. Unfortunately, I think he's right. Now, what Ronaldo is referring to in our last segment, if you guys are just watching this segment of the show, because I do break these things up, is that pretty much what's going on is that Pablo Hidalgo essentially laughed at Star Wars theory for the end of The Mandalorian Season 2.
I got to take a family call real quick, so
all right.
I'll be right back.
All right. I got you covered. So, essentially, while Daryl's basically doing his thing, I think one of the things that you have to look at, no matter what you do, when it comes to the Book of Boba Fett, is that you have to figure out, number one, how did he come into this kind of power? Because he obviously goes in, he shoots Bib Fortuna, and just like out of nowhere, he's taking over the throne. It's almost like he's taking over Jabba's palace. How on earth is that possible? I mean, is it really that much in a tattered remains or whatever that you have a few people in there and it would be that easy? Because the question you have to ask yourself is, why didn't he do that to begin with? Or if you want to go through the whole thing of, maybe he's in the position to, and, he needed his armor and all that, okay, I can hang with that. But the question is, why didn't anybody else take it over? Do you think that maybe it was because Boba Fett was the only one powerful enough? Because everybody certainly saw him as Jabba's right-hand man, and they gave him a lot of the due respect. But I think one of the first questions that has to be answered is, with the Book of Boba Fett here, how did he even come into this kind of prominence? It's one of those things that I think it's really interesting how this series just seemed to drop out of nowhere. Another question I think that they need to go into, and I'm sure when Daryl gets back, he'll agree with this as well. And let me know what you guys are thinking, chat in live, especially since I'm on my own here. The other question they need to answer is, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? I think that's a big one. That's a big one that if you're going to put this series out and you're going to make Boba Fett the focus, you have got to tell us, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? Without question. Because the Sarlacc pit was pretty much one of the central things that happened to this character in the saga. If you remember before, we didn't really know that much about him. We knew a little bit about Boba Fett, but we didn't know a whole lot about Boba Fett. But, so it was one of those things that, he comes in, and I see Daryl's back with us. That's good.
Yes.
I was just telling everybody that we need to, besides how did he take over Jabba's palace, we got to figure out how he got out of the Sarlacc pit.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because, before basically Return of the Jedi, we knew that he was a bounty hunter that was favored by Vader. Mm-hmm. So that elevated his status. We knew a little bit about the holiday special. That whole little animated short or whatever. So we knew going in that Boba Fett was kind of powerful. But what we didn't know is he goes into the Sarlacc pit. He's supposedly there for good.
Mm-hmm.
How does he get out? Now, we know how he got out in the expanded universe.
All right.
But we never got a Disney canon version. So I think that the second question that they need to answer is, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit?
Oh, yeah, that's the number one question on everybody's mind is, how did he get out of the Sarlacc? And then, of course, does he hold Han and Luke responsible for being in the Sarlacc pit to begin with?
Well, the thing that's really interesting about the way that they do, the way they're doing this whole depiction of Boba Fett in The Mandalorian is he's not like a bad guy Or at least he doesn't seem to be. In the original trilogy, he was definitely on the side of the Empire. And, I mean, I get it now that we've humanized the Empire. We've done all that stuff. But Boba Fett was looked at as a bounty hunter. Even then, they weren't necessarily, like, terrible. It's just that they weren't really lawful, I guess, would probably be the best way to put it.
Well, you had some bounty hunters who were, I mean, they're basically equivalent to what you would call like a bail bondsman.
Yep.
So
that's true. Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
so they have a rough job. The job is, okay, I have to track down people, and of course, when you're tracking down people, they're usually criminals, and people don't want to go quietly. Now, when you look at it from the standpoint, the Empire is essentially the government.
I was gonna make that. Yep.
So, if the government is putting like an APB out on, a particular person or group of people or whatever the case may be, it's like, okay, well, it's no different than if the court of, Detroit or somebody said like, hey, we got this guy that's, skipping town or he's causing all this trouble. We need him to be brought in. Now, some bounty hunters follow the law. Others kind of.
I'm glad you added that.
Like,
I was gonna say,
Bosk is the type of guy who's not really going to.
Well, but even Boba Fett, though, man, he's part of a criminal empire with Jabba. I mean, it's not like he was exactly.
But see, once again, he's hired. See, and that's the thing about being a bounty hunter in this Star Wars world, is that you're just a person for hire, no different than Han was a smuggler.
Well, I will say this. You don't really see Boba Fett do anything crazily illegal or criminal.
No.
I mean, all he really does is go after Han. We hate him because he's going after Han, but to him, it's just like, okay, this is a smuggler who's wanted by the legitimate government of the time.
Yeah, and once again, he's still acting under the auspice of the government that hired him. So Jabba being, even though he's a crime lord, or a crime lord on Tatooine, he runs Tatooine.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's kind of like
so he's still that's
sort of like legitimate, but
it's
not
kind of
really.
like the government of, because they don't fall under the jurisdiction of the Empire because they're in the Outer Rim.
Yeah, they're in the Outer Rim, but it makes me wonder how legitimate he is. Like, is he is there a like a puppet government or something, or how do the Tatooine citizens look at it?
Look at what?
Well,
Jabba?
I mean, because we know that Jabba essentially controls it.
Right.
Much the same way the mob controlled Chicago, but they weren't the legitimate government of Chicago. They just controlled it.
Well, I mean, but the thing is that we learned from in Mandalorian, when Cobb Vanth was talking about, like, okay, as soon as the Death Star blew up, these new people tried to come in and take over.
Yeah, criminals, pirates.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's not.
But that's
not really a government, though. I mean, it's.
But what I'm saying, because there was no.
I see. It's almost like the absence of a government.
It's like whoever decides to step up and who has the ability to take care of the people.
I don't know, man. I mean, I could see that.
They become the government.
I could see that happening in like a town or an area, like what happened in the case of.
Like you said, like the Chicago thing is, yeah, like they're the kind of. They weren't the government, but the mob ran a lot of different things, and including government officials.
Right.
But the thing is that there is no government on Tatooine. In the Outer Rim, there's no one that controlled them. That was the whole thing. And that, even in Mandalorian, they said they've been trying to, Grief Karga said it. It's like they've been trying to control the Outer Rim. When would they learn they can't control the Outer? They've been trying to do this since basically the days of the Empire. If the Empire couldn't do it, what makes these people think that they can control the Outer Rim? You can't.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'm going to have to delve into that a little bit. Like which is to say I'll go on StarWars.com and see. So Ronaldo says, let me get this here. I think we'll see how Space Gangster and the Hutts react to how Boba came to power. I hope so, because they kind of have to. He also says, in my opinion, I don't think it's necessary to explain how he got out of the Sarlacc pit, but I do think it is necessary to explain why he did not recover his armor from Cobb Vanth earlier. There is actually an in-new canon story on that, the Aftermath trilogy, that talks about how essentially Cobb Vanth got it from some Jawas So one of two things happened, because he certainly went into the Sarlacc with his armor.
Mm-hmm.
So either the Sarlacc kind of yacked up his outfit, or maybe when he got out or something. I mean, that. So from that standpoint, I can see what Ronaldo is saying. It's kind of like, well, we have to sort of figure out, how did Boba Fett get separated from his armor?
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think in order to do that, you have to explain how he got out of the Starlight Pit.
Well, I mean, I think that I understand what Ronaldo's saying in the sense of, if you just say he got out of it, then he just got out of it. I mean, not everything needs to be explained. Sarlacc Pit, on the other hand, I kind of think that needs to be explained.
Definitely. I mean, when you have a creature that one will slowly digest you over the course of 10,000 years, and then when you look at how the thing is structured, how do you get out of something like that? Especially, you got stomach acids and all this kind of stuff. I mean,
I just think they need to go with the explanation of the expanded universe on that one.
Mm-hmm.
That would actually be my suggestion, but I don't know. I don't know. But that's two. So I mean, first we got to figure out how, because when you were gone, one of the things that I put forth was when he took over and shot up Bib Fortuna, and it's kind of like, okay,
he was definitely put on some pounds.
Yeah. Which is interesting. It's the same actor who actually played him in The Phantom Menace. But why didn't anybody do that to begin with? I mean, it didn't seem like it was all that difficult to take out the few people that were even in there. And why did Boba Fett wait till now? Which, of course, I'm sure has something to do with him getting his armor back, and, it's probably all part of his master plan. But what I'm saying is they got to actually talk about that. I mean, you can't just show a post-credit scene where he takes over Jabba's palace, and we're like, okay, how did that come up?
Yeah.
And what's his grand plan?
Well, that's the other question. They said, what will Boba Fett do now that he's in charge of Tatooine's underworld?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Because that's, obviously there's a grand plan there. There's some sort of a master plan. There's something, because you could tell how methodical he was. Now, granted, he took a little bit of a detour from that to help Din. But at the same time, it's like, okay, first I got to get my armor. Then I got to go shoot up Jabba's palace and take over. There's something going on.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. He definitely has a plan. But it's just, but see, I think what he's going to try to do, at least my speculation, because I think they kind of hinted towards it a little bit when Din and Boba walked into that cantina and they were talking about Mandalore. And he's like, well, why would you want to go back there? That's, places like Glass. They let that Empire kind of just ransack that place. But at Tatooine, he probably feels like, okay, I can set up my own new clan of bounty hunters or Mandalorian or whatever he wants.
Well, I wonder if Bo-Katan's going to figure into this at all, because, one of the things that came a little bit from the expanded universe, but definitely is carried over. Well, I mean, in particular, the Clone Wars, a little bit, at least for Jango. And maybe a little bit Boba, is how the Mandalorians don't like the Fetts and think that they're just pretenders. Even though the Mandalorian did sort of retcon a little bit Boba Fett once again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, look, Jango and Boba are now actually Mandalorians. It's like, okay. First, Boba Fett was a guy named Jaster Muriel or whatever, and he was a Mandalorian or whatever. And then it's kind of like George said, nope. He's actually an unaltered clone of Jango and kind of like his son. And they're wearing the Mandalorian armor, but they're not really Mandalorians. And then now in the Mandalorian, we get, oh, just kidding. Now they're actually Mandalorians.
Yeah, I think, he has some, honestly, I think it's going to end up coming down between Bo-Katan and Boba. I think they're going to basically kind of fight for the name of some things, and I think Boca is going to kind of start her whole thing on Mandalore if she can get the Darksaber back from Din. And I think that Boba's going to kind of try to do his own thing.
Yeah, but do you think that we're getting this mini series? So it's like a 2-part question. I won't name off everything, but it's kind of, so I'll keep it at a two-part. Number one, do you think Boba's going to show up on The Mandalorian again?
Yes.
Okay. And then two, do you think he's going to show up on any of the other series?
Yes.
All right, Jessup. Let me just get to Ronaldo's comment really quick because it kind of factors into what we're talking about. It would also be good to explain if the New Republic will do something about Boba, Ronaldo says. I don't think they will let him operate easily.
No, and that's why I believe he's going to play a part, I think, on the Rangers show.
Yeah, the Rangers is probably the show, other than The Mandalorian, that I could see him being on.
Definitely, because it's dealing with the law. It's dealing with, the New Republic trying to kind of seize control of things and kind of establish order. I think it's going to put Cara Dune in a vicarious situation because she's done stuff with Boba, so she likes him. But if the New Republic, which is basically her new boss now, is basically telling her like, well, we need you to hunt, so it's going to be a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think that definitely we're going to start seeing things like that. And also, another thing that I think we're going to see, he may show up, and it's kind of unlikely. There's an off chance he could show up in Ahsoka.
Boba?
Yeah. I only say that because Ahsoka's going to take place in the same time period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Bo-Katan is actually going to play a little bit of a role in there.
Oh, yeah. I believe so, too.
But what's going to be interesting, though, is that even though Thrawn was mentioned in The Mandalorian, I'm not sure if he's actually going to be in The Mandalorian or if that was kind of the introduction to
that character.
Yeah, because Ahsoka is after him.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for Ezra and for maybe a host of other reasons. So maybe that was a way to introduce the character and say, hey, Thrawn's coming in live action, but this is more for Ahsoka's story. Because obviously Thrawn, you could say that maybe he was pulling Gideon strings, but we don't know that. Now, if Bo-Katan shows up in Ahsoka, there's an off chance that maybe Boba will fall into that as well. And I only say that because there's more to that story. I mean, when you see, like you said, when you see that scene between Boba Fett and Bo-Katan and her other little minions, there's something there. Yeah. There's a backstory there.
Definitely.
And I do wonder if that's going to show up in the Boba Fett series too. And now, I'm trying to remember, did they actually say how long that series was going to be? Like how many episodes?
No, they haven't given really much information, but I think it's going to be a limited run though.
Yeah, well, the thing is it going to be like, because they kind of called it a mini-series, so are we talking like 4 or 5 episodes? Are we doing a full-blown season, which would be 8? So it's just a one and done? Ronaldo says, it's strange to see everything that is going to happen with these interconnected series and how they were probably ignored in the sequels.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the other dangerous timeline, and this is why I say that I could see Lucasfilm eventually softly rebooting the sequel trilogy, because one of the dangers of coming up with all this stuff that happens before, if they keep it early enough, they can get away with it. But the problem is that they start getting a little too close to The Force Awakens, their absence is going to be conspicuous. I mean, you're already having this problem by having all these Jedi surviving, because everybody's like, well, where was Ahsoka during, the original trilogy? The other thing is Mace Windu. People are thinking Mace Windu is going to pop up, especially because on his birthday, last week.
Oh, Samuel L. Jackson's birthday, yeah.
StarWars.com, or the actual Star Wars official site, basically wished him a happy birthday and said that
the story's not over yet.
Yeah, the story's not over yet.
Or it's just begun.
Or it's just begun, yeah. And they posted it, they showed him as Mace Windu, and it's like you gotta wonder what's up with that. I mean, most of the time you could dismiss it, but it's like they know how the fans are. You don't really want to go playing with the fans like that, especially when they're already theorizing these things.
Yeah.
So it would not surprise me if Mace shows up in Ahsoka. And it goes to Ronaldo's point where it's kind of like, you know what? Where all these series are interconnected, it's going to be interesting to see how they're connected to each other. Now, there's some like the Acolyte and stuff like that where you're not going to get much crossover.
Right.
But I could see The Mandalorian being kind of the flagship show.
Yeah, the hub.
The hub, perfect term. It's the hub, and then you have all these other shows that are sort of
plugging into
kind of like surrounding the nucleus. Yeah, exactly. You know, and you could draw a chart to it, and it really makes me wonder what they're going to do. Just like the whole Luke Skywalker series that we started talking about with this show. You know, it's going to be interesting. So, what about you guys? What are you thinking as far as the Book of Boba Fett? Do you think that the questions that we put forth are pretty much it? Those are the definitive answers? Or are there additional answers that you guys think that need to be put forth in this series? Or another option, do you actually think a different set of answers need to be answered? How many times can I say that? It's almost like a drinking game. Let us know in the comment section what you guys are thinking.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.